Tangerine, Monday, August 28th through Thursday, September 7th. Monday, August 28th. Today was the first day of school. I left the house at 7:30 to walk to the front of the development and catch the bus. The smoke was thick and strong smelling. I walked past dark green dumpsters filled with plasterboard and scrap metal, past blue portable toilets parked along the construction lots. It occurred to me that I've never lived in a development that was finished. I have always lived with overflowing construction dumpsters and portable toilets sitting on boards. I turned right at the end of Kensington Gardens Drive and walked parallel to the high gray wall. Something started to bother me almost immediately. The gray of the wall drifted along in the left side of my vision, distracting me, troubling me. What was it? Something about the wall? Something about a bus stop? Something that I needed to remember? My steps slowed down and I came to a dead stop, frozen there like a wind up toy that had run out of torque. Then a scene came back to me, just like the other morning in Houston. Entirely on its own, a scene came back to me. I remembered another bus stop and a shiny yellow school bus. I was standing at the back of a line of kids waiting to board the bus for one of my first days at kindergarten. Mom had driven me to school on the actual first day. This was the first day when I would be accompanied by no one except Eric, my fifth grade brother. But Eric did not accompany me for long. He was standing at the front of the school bus line with his fifth grade friends when one of them turned, made a gesture, and called to me, "Hey, Eclipse boy, how many fingers am I holding up?" I didn't realize at first that the boy was talking to me, and I had no idea what he meant. Eric and his friends laughed about the joke. Then the bus doors opened and we all filed in. I can't put all of the details in order now, but it became clear to me later that for some reason the big kids on the school bus were calling me Eclipse Boy. The fact is, we did have an eclipse that summer, around 3 weeks before school started. Based on that, Eric was telling his friends this story. The reason for the Coke bottle glasses on my eyes was that I had stared at the sun unprotected during that eclipse. The story puzzled me then, and it puzzled me now. I do not remember doing any such thing, and yet when I search through our family photos, I can see that I never wore glasses of any kind before that summer. But right after the eclipse, I was wearing these thick lenses that I now call my regular glasses. Puzzled or not, I went right along with the story. I even told it myself. It gave me a special kindergarten identity. It made me somebody. I was the boy who had not listened and who was now paying the price. Look at me, if you dare. The teachers and other adults seemed to value me as an example. I was the living proof that you shouldn't look at an eclipse or you'll go blind, that you shouldn't play in an abandoned refrigerator or you'll suffocate, that you shouldn't go swimming right after you eat or you'll get stomach cramps and drown. So there I sat on the yellow school bus, Eric Fisher's younger brother, Eclipse Boy, visually impaired and totally incapable of following in his brother's footsteps. The scene faded. I stood still for another minute, trying to remember more, but nothing would come. Then I made myself turn away from the wall, and I made my legs move again, one step in front of the other, to the end of the street. As I turned the corner, I was surprised to see other kids standing next to the guardhouse. In my 2 weeks here, I had never seen any other kid in Lake Windsor Downs, even though I had ridden my bike up and down all of the streets at all times of the day. Now here they are, spread out in a lazy line, about 10 kids of various sizes. I quietly took my place at the end of the line, next to a guy who was slouching so badly that I thought he might actually fall over. He wasn't alone either. Everyone seemed to be depressed, to be sorry to be there. I wondered if that was just an act, or if they really didn't feel any excitement about the first day of school. "What's up, goalie?" I turned startled to find that someone was standing right behind me. I hadn't seen him coming. It was Joey Costello. I held out my hand and said, "It's Paul Fisher. You're Joey, right?" "Right," he answered, shaking my hand. "I met your brother over at my house. I met your father, too." "Yeah, they said something about that. They said your brother can kick 50-yard field goals." "Right. Yeah, he can." Mike says Coach Warner has him holding the ball for him. His name's Eric, right? Yeah, I had a feeling Mike might be holding the ball for Eric when he told us he was a backup quarterback. Joey thought for a moment, then said, Mike's getting a bad break, you know. Mike's a good player. He's a lineman, not a quarterback. And now he's playing behind Antoine Thomas, the best quarterback in the state. He'll never get to play unless something bad happens to Antoine. And then everybody will be mad because Mike ain't no Antoine. Yeah, he can't win. The bus turned into the entranceway and stopped in front of us. When we climbed on, Joey sat with one of the soccer players from the other day. I found an empty seat near the back and pulled out my class schedule. The school had sent us a computerized schedule that showed my 6 periods, teachers' names, and classroom numbers. With the schedule had come a map of the high school, middle school campus, which I appreciated, and a handwritten note to Mom from Mrs. Gates, which I did not. It said vision impaired students should report to the office for assistance. That made me mad. What did she plan to do? Assign me a dog and a cane? The bus turned into the campus and drove around to a circular driveway that said buses only. I looked again at my schedule, feeling jittery. It said homeroom 8:15 to 8:25, portable 9. I moved along with a big crowd of kids circling the main building and funneling into the wooden walkways that led to the portables. I found the one that said P9 with no problem whatsoever. There was a green sign on the door that said Miss Alvarez. I climbed the 3 wooden stairs and opened the door. Miss Alvarez gave me a cheery good morning and told me to find an empty desk. The class seems to be made up of the same type of droopy kids that had stood with me at the bus line. In contrast, Miss Alvarez has a lot of enthusiasm. She told us she was truly excited to be here on the first day of a new year. She went on to tell us that we're her first homeroom ever, and she's been looking forward to starting each day with us. We sat there and stared at her without much reaction, but she smiled bravely through it, and we passed the first 10 minutes of the school year together. She asked us all to take out our schedules and check them. Mine said science 8:30 to 9:25, portable 12. Miss Alvarez read some announcements from a computer printout, but there was nothing about the soccer team. The speaker in the room crackled to life with the sound of a gong being struck. This was our signal to funnel out again onto the wooden walkways. We had 4 minutes to get to our next class, but it took me less than one. I climbed up a set of stairs marked P12, where the green sign says Mrs. Hoffman. Mrs. Hoffman was standing right inside the door, scowling and holding a seating chart. She's clearly at the other end of the teacher food chain from Miss Alvarez. As she would soon tell us, she has been teaching science for 20 years. She asked my name and then directed me to the last seat in the first row. The kids in this room seem a little more lively. Just 5 minutes into Mrs. Hoffman's class, there was a knock on the door. A girl came in holding a block of wood with the word pass painted on it. She whispered to Mrs. Hoffman, who checked her chart, looked toward me, and said, Paul Fisher, go with this young lady, please. What could I do? I got up. I followed the girl out the door and onto the walkway. I said, where are we going? Mr. Murrow's office. Who's Mr. Murrow? He's the head of guidance. We went to a small office inside the main office. A man with a brown suit and thick glasses like mine was sitting at a desk. He had a pile of those IEP forms spread out in front of him. He said, and what is your name? Paul Fisher, sir. He found my IEP form. All right, Paul, this is Carrie Gardner, one of our school volunteers. Carrie will act as your eyes, so to speak, until you've learned your way around our campus. I can see fine. He seemed genuinely surprised. You can? Yes, sir. I've been to 2 classes already. Mr. Murrow looked back at my IEP form and then at me. He said, well, perhaps since you're new to our school, Carrie could just take you around for the first day. What harm could that do? I didn't know what else to say. I didn't know how to describe the harm that would do to me. Nothing more came out of my mouth, so he said, why don't you two go back to Mrs. Hoffman's class? I followed Carrie Gardner back to P12, actually to the wooden steps outside of it. That was where I finally found my voice. I stopped still and said as calmly as I could, "Look, I'm sorry. I don't mean to mess up your job, but there's no reason for anyone to show me around, okay?" She looked at me puzzled, so I explained, "There's nothing wrong with me. This is a mistake. I can see just fine." Carrie answered matter of factly, "So then what's with the glasses?" I reached up and fingered the thick plastic frames. I finally answered, "I had an accident. I had some kind of damage to my eyes when I was 5 years old." Carrie clearly did not mind being released from her duties. She thought for a moment, lowered her voice, and said, "Look, I I'll hold on to the pass until the end of the day and then turn it in. Nobody'll know." "Okay, thanks." Carrie started off, but turned back to ask, "What was the accident? What damaged your eyes?" "I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure," I replied. She took off again, leaving me thinking, why didn't I answer that question? I used to have an answer ready for that question. I used to tell people that I once stared too long at a solar eclipse. But if that's the truth, if that really happened, why can't I remember it? Wednesday, August 30th. I'm in my room now, at the computer, listening to the sound of Eric kicking a football into a net in the backyard. It's a short, violent sound, like some big guy's holding up some little guy and punching him over and over in the stomach. Poof, poof, poof. The Eric Fisher football dream seems to be materializing. Arthur Bauer is holding the ball for him today, crouching low and spinning the laces away just like Dad, just like Mike Costello. Arthur is a senior like Eric. Unlike Eric, he seems to have no special talent for football, and yet here he is, a third string bench warmer kind of guy, holding the ball for the great Eric Fisher. Arthur has a sister named Paige, who is a sophomore and a cheerleader. Paige is down there too. She is clearly going to be Eric's girlfriend. Arthur's girlfriend is named Tina Turretin. She's sitting next to Paige. Tina is a junior and, of course, a cheerleader. The four of them are hanging out in the smoke of the late afternoon muck fire, ignited by an early afternoon lightning strike. Poof, poof, poof. Mom has already done her research on Eric's friends. She pumps him for information over dinner every night and he tells her whatever she wants to know. Arthur and Paige Bauer are the yellow Stuart with a brick front. Their father is a building contractor and a major in the Army National Guard. They moved in 3 years ago. Tina Turton is the white York, like ours, but with avocado trim. She's only lived here a year. They're a strange foursome, sitting back there in the smoke. Basically, they pay no attention to each other. The girls are on the cement patio, sitting at the redwood picnic table doing homework. The boys are on the grass, kicking the ball into the net. Poof, poof, poof. I guess Paige and Tina want to date football players, so these two will do. Eric and Arthur want to date cheerleaders, so these two will do. I watched them all pull up to the house in Arthur Bauer's truck. Then I hurried upstairs. Arthur has a white Toyota Land Cruiser that he's jacked up and put big tires on for mud running. That's what they do around here. They take their jacked up trucks out into the swamps and mud run. When they can't do that, they run up and down the dirt road behind our wall, the perimeter road. Arthur's truck has a big spotlight mounted on the top at the center of the windshield so he can go mud running at night. Now he can take Eric mud running, and he can take Eric to practice, and he can take Eric wherever else Eric says to take him. You see, Eric doesn't drive. Can you believe that? One of the greatest things about high school is that you can drive all by yourself. You're free. But Eric doesn't drive. He has never even expressed an interest in driving. Tell me that isn't strange. From my bedroom window, I can see them all clearly, especially Arthur Bauer, and I can predict his future. Arthur is about to get his big break, his chance to be somebody at Lake Windsor High. Let's face it, Arthur Bauer is no Mike Costello. He is not the backup quarterback to Antoine Thomas. He has not already been accepted into FSU's School of Engineering. He has never really accomplished anything until now. This is his shot at the big time. He will somehow, with Eric's help, beat out Mike Costello for the job of holder on the place kicks. It will be Arthur's backside featured in the newspapers holding the ball for Eric Fisher's 50-yard field goal attempts. According to Joey Costello, Arthur has never even gotten into a game. Now he'll be out there when the crowd is roaring and the cameras are flashing and the game is on the line. What will Arthur do for an opportunity like that, for that kind of fame and glory? What will Arthur do for Eric, his sponsor, his benefactor, his ticket to the big game? Let's face it, he will do anything. He will do anything that Eric asks. He has found himself a place in the Eric Fisher football dream, and he will do anything to stay there. I've always been afraid of Eric. Now I get to be afraid of Eric and Arthur. Thursday, August 31st. In addition to my regular glasses, I have special goggles, prescription goggles for playing sports. They're made out of some kind of astronaut plastic that could crash land on Venus and not break. Nothing can break them. If the dinosaurs had worn these goggles and the Earth had been bombarded by mile-wide asteroid boulders, the dinosaurs would still have died, but their goggles would be intact. Nothing can break these goggles. The reason I bring this up is that Miss Alvarez read the announcements this morning that tryouts for the soccer teams, boys and girls, will start tomorrow. I have my goaltending gear, the prescription goggles, knee pads, and elbow pads in a drawer in my room. I just checked the drawer to make sure everything was ready. I didn't want to find out tomorrow that my gear was all packed away in our climate-controlled storage on Route 22. Mom and I took some stuff to the storage place today. Mom is not adjusting well to the smoke from the muck fire. She took down her mother's drapes from the dining room and packed them up with her grandmother's quilts from the bedrooms. I won't have them ruined by this smoke, she told me as I lugged the boxes out to the car. We'll put them back out when your grandparents visit in December. My grandparents are Mom's parents. Dad's parents died when he was young. His father when he was 10 and his mother when he was a freshman in college. Dad never talks about them. It's like they never existed. Mom doesn't talk much about hers either. I know that my grandfather retired from the Army as a master sergeant. He still works as a security guard in an office building. My grandmother always ran a daycare business out of her home, wherever that happened to be, right up until last year. Mom says that's where she inherited her own organizational skills. Mom is now donating those skills to the Homeowners Association of Lake Windsor Downs. Mr. Costello asked her to be on the architectural committee. It's a powerful position. If you have any plan to improve your house, even if it's just planting a new tree, you have to have it approved beforehand by the architectural committee. Because of this, Mom has taken to spotting irregularities whenever we drive into or out of the development. She's taken to saying stuff like, look at that trim color on that Lancaster. That's not regulation trim color. It looks like pea soup. Today she said, look at the mailbox on that Tudor. It's not a Tudor-style mailbox. I said, lighten up, Mom. Don't tell me to lighten up. These people all read and signed the regulations before they bought houses here. Those regulations are serious, Paul. This development has a certain look to it. If you like that look, then you buy a house here. If you don't like that look, then you buy a house someplace else. What harm could it do to have a non-Tudor mailbox? Mom thought about that one. Not much, I suppose. I won't send them a letter about the mailbox because the one they have doesn't look bad. But if 20 more houses decide to put up 20 different styles of mailboxes, it'd start to look like a shanty town around here. Mom suddenly got very serious. Paul, I'm talking as somebody who never ever lived in a nice house growing up, or even lived anywhere near a nice house. This is not a joke to me. Your house is your family's biggest investment, and you have to protect that investment. At the storage place, Mom showed her ID to an elderly guard who waved us on. I unlocked our bin, pulled up the sliding metal door, and stacked the boxes inside. On the way home, I turned the conversation to the soccer tryouts. Mom actually had a good suggestion. She said, you should call that Joey Costello boy. You two could run some laps tonight. Maybe we can get a soccer team carpool going with them too. I called Joey as soon as we got back and asked him if he wanted to start running. He said he runs it every night at 6:30 and I could meet him at the guardhouse if I wanted. I said okay and hung up. That was odd. If he ran every night, why had I never seen him? Anyway, Joey turned out to be pretty funny. Up until now, he'd been a little stiff. We started to run with the sand at our backs and just a trace of smoke in the air. On our second lap, he pointed to a house, a white Stuart, on a corner lot. He said, "You see that house? Mr. Donnelly and his son live there. They've been hit by lightning 3 times." No way. Absolutely 3 times. Are they losers or what? I had to laugh when I noticed the sign on their front lawn. Hey, look, it's for sale. Yeah, like they've got a prayer. I don't know. When you're looking at a house, does anybody tell you bad stuff like that? Joey said, No way. They'd never mention it. What if you found out? They'd tell you that it was a good thing. They tell you that statistically it's the safest house in the whole development, maybe in the whole world. There's almost no chance that this house would ever get hit by lightning again. I looked back over my shoulder at the receding Stuart. It'll get hit again and again, and I'll tell you why. Why? The lightning, it knows that spot. What are you talking about? I pointed at an empty lot full of sugar sand. Think about this place. After they plowed under all the tangerine groves, what did they do? Who? What did who do? The developers, the construction guys. What did they do? Well, I don't know. They leveled everything out with bulldozers, right? They brought in tons and tons of that white sand and dumped it here. Then they landscaped over everything. Yeah, so what? So let's say that the corner house used to be the highest ground around here for miles. Maybe it was the top of a rise with big trees on it. So that's where the lightning always used to strike. Then it must have had big dead trees on it. Whatever. This is the highest spot and it worked like a lightning rod. Now you could bring back those developers and the construction guys and the engineers and ask them to point out where the highest spot around here used to be. No, not one of them would know. But the lightning knows. It hits right where it always hit. It's just that some fool has stuck a house there. I pointed back toward the front of the development, toward the 4 English royal family models. Who knows? Maybe someday, after all this crumbles away, the trees will be back and these storms will make sense again. We completed our second lap. Joey was looking at me a little strangely. He said, See you tomorrow. Right, tryouts are at 4. You need a ride home? Nah, I'll catch a ride with Mike. Okay. I started off, but Joey was struggling with something. He finally said, Hey, Fisher, I don't think lightning is that complicated. I don't think it knows anything about anything. I thought about that. Yeah, maybe I'm exaggerating, but maybe I'm not. Friday, September 1st. My last class of the day is language arts with Mrs. Bridges. If you think we're slugs in the morning with Miss Alvarez, you should see by sixth period. Some kids actually fall asleep, but I don't think they're completely to blame. By the time we get to sixth period, the portables air conditioners have been struggling along for 7 hours, with the doors constantly opening and closing. We're sweating buckets by then. We're wilting. Even Mrs. Bridges' perm is wilting by then. But today, when the speaker crackled on and the gong bell sounded, I was filled with new energy. I hefted up my gym bag and set off for the soccer tryouts. Just to the south of the portables is a baseball diamond with a scoreboard that says Lake Windsor Middle School, home of the Seagulls. The soccer field is to the left of that, next to a stretch of undeveloped land. As I left the wooden walkways, Joey fell into step with me, and we jogged together to the fields. You're a pretty good goalie, right? He asked me. Right, I said. Then I'm going out for fullback. Hey, we need at least 2 goalies. What if I get killed? You're not going to get killed. I'll play fullback. I like fullback. You get to knock people down. Suit yourself. Joey pointed to a circle of kids near the sideline. Check out Tommy over there, the kid with the ball. He's from the Philippines. Awesome display, man. Awesome. I looked over and recognized a kid from my homeroom, Tommy Acoso. He had a group of guys standing around watching him like he was a juggler. We stopped to watch him too. He kept hitting the ball straight up in the air with his head, feet, and knees, never letting it touch the ground, just keeping it going and going and going. Sometimes he would make it stop dead right on his forehead. It was an awesome display. Not all of these guys were the toe stubbers who I played with last week. That's Gino over there, Joey whispered. Gino DeLuca. He's the captain this year, no doubt. He was a co-captain last year, scored 22 goals. I saw a big guy, big for a soccer player, with long curly black hair. He was driving penalty kicks into the net from 12 yards out. I asked Joey, "Where's he from?" "I don't know, New Jersey, I think." Gino kept hammering penalty shots into the upper left corner of the goal while a tall kid in a gray sweatshirt retrieved the ball and rolled it back. Gino is obviously a major leaguer. He's the kind of guy you have to have on a soccer team in order to win. The guy who wants to take the penalty kicks, the guy who's hungry to score the goals. The head coach is Mr. Walski, an eighth grade teacher. He blew a whistle and we all moved toward him. He looks more like a basketball guy to me, but he coached the soccer team last season and he knows most of the seventh and eighth graders. He's tall and nearly bald. When he spoke, it was in a raspy voice. "I want to congratulate you guys on making the team." There was a scattering of laughter. For those of you who may not know it, our policy in the Lake Windsor Middle School soccer program is this: everybody makes the team, everybody practices, and everybody gets a uniform. However, and he paused here for emphasis, that does not mean that everybody is, as we say, on the bus. Everybody cannot, and I must emphasize, cannot go to every away game. We have a small team bus and we have restrictions due to insurance. We can only take 15 kids to the away games. That's our policy. You're a part of this team from day one, but your part may be to play in practice games only and to dress for home games only. Does everybody understand? There were nods around the group. The coach continued, "Okay, let's get started. Gino, you're the captain. Take them twice around the field. Then we're going to break into sixth, seventh, and eighth grade groups and start calisthenics. Let's move it." I ran with Joey and about 30 other guys twice around the field. "That means half of us are doing our dog meat," Joey muttered. "What are you complaining about? You're on the team." 15 kids are on the real team and 15 kids are dog meat. I was dog meat last year and it was a drag. I don't want to do that again. Hey, it makes sense to me. Why drive all these extra guys to a game when there's no chance they're going to play? Yeah, that's easy for you to say. After calisthenics, we broke into groups to kick the ball around. I had no reason to do that, so I found my gym bag and got out my goggles, knee pads, and elbow pads. Gino and some of the eighth graders were back at the goal, kicking shots at the kid in the gray sweatshirt. I walked up to the next to the goal and stood there until they couldn't help but notice me. The kid in gray checked out my goggles and said, "Yow, it came from Mars." The eighth graders laughed, but when I didn't go away, Gino said, "You here to play, or you here to model sportswear?" "To play." Gino motioned, and the kid in the gray sweatshirt stood off to the side. I moved into the goal, dead in the center, and placed my heels on the chalk line. A kid with red hair was next in line to kick. He took a shot that rolled wide of the goal. I never even moved. I was waiting for Gino, and he knew it. He called for the ball and then placed it with care on the penalty line. He stepped back 3 paces and looked right at me. I got down into my goalie crouch, a coiled spring ready to release. Gino shouted like a samurai, took 2 quick steps, and started his powerful kick. I sprang up and to my right, exactly where I had watched him kick every other penalty shot. I heard the sound of his foot walloping the ball, and then I felt it smack against my right wrist. The ball flew away from the goal as fast as it had flown in. It sailed toward the far sideline. I hit the ground and popped up immediately, ready for more. Gino looked at the ball bouncing away in the distance and looked back at me. He seemed genuinely surprised. Whoa, he said quietly and gave me a thumbs up sign with both hands. The kid in the gray sweatshirt hung around by the goal for another minute. Then he casually walked out and joined the others in the line, waiting for a turn to kick one at me. The coach didn't see any of this, but I knew I had just landed the job. I was now the Lake Windsor Middle School goaltender, first string goaltender, on the bus goaltender. Tuesday, September 5th. Mom and I had just returned home from the supermarket. We were unloading her station wagon, carrying bags of groceries from the garage into the kitchen, when Eric and Arthur pulled up in the Land Cruiser. There was mud splattered all over the sides, all over the tinted windows, and even up the center spotlight. Eric got out of the passenger side and walked up to Mom, slowly and solemnly. Arthur got out and followed him. Eric stopped just inside the garage and said, Mike Costello is dead, Mom. He got killed at practice today. Mom and I stopped still, the supermarket bags weighing down our arms. Neither of us moved or knew what to do next. We stared at him speechless until he continued in the same voice. He was just standing there in the end zone. He had one hand on the goalpost, leaning on it, and kaboom! There was a crack and a flash, and he went flying through the air. He landed right on his back, right there on the goal line. By now, Mom was staring hard at him, trying to understand the point of this speech. Eric, the boy who was here, Mike, is dead? Dead before he hit the ground. Arthur and I went over and looked at him. Right? Arthur spoke up. Right. The whole left side of his hair was burned off, singed off, you know. Mom still did not seem to comprehend. She struggled for words. What? Eric, tell me exactly what you did. Me? Nothing. There was nothing I could do. Coach Warner, all the other coaches, they surrounded him. They started banging on his chest. Arthur added, banging on him. Doing CPR, everybody was going nuts. Dad started running up to his car phone, dialing 911. Mom said, Your father? Your father called 911? Yeah. Ambulances came, cop cars came. They had this power pack thing, you know. Arthur said, jump-starting him. They were trying to jumpstart his heart. They were sticking needles in him, everything, but nothing worked because he was already dead. He was dead before he hit the ground. What about Jack? Jack Costello. Was he there watching all of this? No, I didn't see him. I think his brother was there. Eric looked over at Arthur. Was that his brother? Arthur said, yeah, and seemed to fight back a smile. Eric continued. His little brother freaked out. He went crazy. He kept trying to take Mike's shoes. I thought the coach was going to have to smack him. He wouldn't get out of the way. He just kept trying to get those shoes off. Did you see that? Eric looked at Arthur again, who covered up his face with his hand. Mom picked up the phone. She tried to reach Dad, first at his mobile number, then through his office beeper, but she couldn't. I asked her, should I call Joey? No, we can't call the Costellos now. We can't intrude on them. Mom banged out another number on the phone. I'm going to try the school. There was no answer at the school either. Mom stood there staring at the bags of groceries. She looked like she was going to pass out. The ring of the telephone made her jump. It was Dad calling from the hospital. He told her basically the same story that Eric had, right down to Joey Costello and the problem with Mike's shoes. Joey and his parents were at the hospital, and Mike had been officially pronounced dead. Dad said that everyone there was in a state of shock. I know I was. I carried my bags of groceries on into the kitchen and set them down. Then I heard a strange sound. It was a sound of voices in the backyard, happy voices. I looked through the patio doors and saw Eric and Arthur. They were laughing. I stepped closer to the doors and I could hear Eric saying, Did you see his hair? Did you see the side of his head? He got mohawked, man. Arthur said, Mohawked? I watched them in disbelief. How could they be happy? Who were these two people? Then I realized it. They were the two people who would benefit from Mike Costello's death. They were celebrating it. Eric grabbed at Arthur's shoes and screamed in a high-pitched voice, The shoes! Give me the shoes! I turned to look for Mom. She was still in the garage on the phone with Dad. She saw none of this. She heard none of this. I turned back to watch the cruel comedy routine on the other side of the glass. There they were, Eric and a nasty friend, just like I remembered them in Houston. Nothing had changed except the name of the friend. I felt sick and confused. I asked myself, how could this happen? How could this happen to Mike Costello? He was a nice guy. He was number 2 on the depth chart. He was already accepted into the School of Engineering at FSU. And I answered myself, here's how, because Mike Costello didn't fit into the Eric Fisher football dream. Mike would never, could never have been sitting out there with Eric and laughing at such a thing. Now Mike is dead, but the dream lives on. Wednesday, September 6th. My mom seemed to think that they would be canceling classes at the high school today and sending everyone home early because of the tragedy with Mike Costello. Mom was way off on that one. They didn't cancel classes. They didn't even cancel football practice. I watched the football practice from a distance. I stood in a goal on the soccer field, looking through the backside of the football stadium bleachers. Different pockets of players were doing different drills. It all looked very violent today. Over here, they were shouting and hitting a tackling dummy. Over there, they were hurling their bodies at a blocking sled, trying to drive it backwards. In the middle of all this knocking down and getting knocked down and getting back up again, I could see Eric standing at the 50-yard line, untouched by it all. Calmly, deliberately, he drilled his field goals between the upright posts in the end zone. But Mike Costello was not there to spin the laces away from the kicker and set the ball down. Mike Costello was on a slab at the Undertaker's. No, there was another backside in the distance today, Arthur Bowers. Naturally, Joey Costello was not at soccer practice or at school. I expected to hear something about Mike over the loudspeaker, but the only announcement they read was about reduced tickets to a carnival that was coming to Tangerine. No prayer for Mike Costello or pray for Joey Costello. Mrs. Alvarez, though, wrote his address on a chalkboard and urged everyone who knows Joey to send a card to the family. A couple of guys at soccer practice were talking about the accident. They said that the principal of the high school, Mr. Bridges, husband of my language arts teacher, read an announcement. Mr. Bridges said the student council planned to do something special to honor Mike's memory. He didn't say what the something was. It obviously wasn't canceling football practice. Mom and Dad are at each other's throats arguing about all of this, the football practice, the lightning, the kind of place we live in now. Mom is determined to call the parents of each and every football player to get them together and have them refuse to send their sons to any more afternoon practices. Dad apparently is arguing the other side. Coach Warner now refers to Dad as one of his football fathers. Dad likes that, and I think he is afraid of doing anything that might mess up his status. Mom's reply was something like, "Dead boys don't kick footballs." Soccer practice was a colossal drag. We spent most of the time playing a pointless and goalless scrimmage game. The 6th and 7th graders versus the 8th graders. I hate games like that. The ball never gets near the goal. Two teams full of clueless toe stubbers keep kicking it back and forth at each other, never going 20 yards past either side of midfield. The kid in the gray sweatshirt played goal for the 8th graders. He had a shutout going too. It's obvious to me that there are only a handful of real players on this team. Our side had Tommy and me. Their side had Gino and a couple of big guys playing fullback. Everybody else who got the ball just kicked it away in a panic. We have absolutely nobody at midfield. That's why the pointless toe-stubbing battle continued to rage. There is no in-between on this team. We have two great strikers in Tommy and Gino, one great goaltender in me, and a freezer full of dog meat. Maybe when Tommy and Gino get together on the front line, they can feed off each other. I sure hope so. While I was standing there in the goal waiting for something to happen, my mind started to wander. I started thinking about Joey and what he must be going through. I wondered what I would be like in Joey's place. What if my brother had landed on the goal line, the left side of his hair singed off? What if Eric was the body at the Undertaker's now? How would I feel about that? I would feel relieved. I would feel safer, but I would feel sorry too. Eric is a part of that eclipse story. I know he is. Eric is a part of whatever it is that I need to remember. I don't want Eric to die and take his part of this story with him. Thursday, September 7th. Mom began her telephone campaign at 9 a.m. She had a list of all the numbers in Lake Windsor Downs. She called everyone she knew of who had a son on the football team. After a few hours of this, was interrupted by a call from Dad. The principal of Lake Windsor High School, Mr. Bridges, had called him. Mr. Bridges told Dad that he was getting complaints from parents about the afternoon football practices. Dad and Mr. Bridges arranged to have a meeting at our house tonight with Coach Warner and anyone else who wanted to come. Mom acted surprised, hung up, then returned to her list and called back everyone who had expressed interest. She asked them all to meet at our house at 7:45. After dinner, I helped Mom arrange couches and extra chairs in the great room. Eric went out with Arthur. For a while, I could hear them racing up and down the perimeter road in the mud. Then they were gone. By 7:55, 12 parents had arrived. They sat in the great room with Dad and made small talk about the Japanese fish in our lake. Stuff like, are the koi disappearing from the lake? Are they dying? Is someone fishing in the lake at night? Could there be an alligator eating the koi? Mom answered the door at 8:05 to Mr. Bridges, a short round man in a blue shirt, and Coach Warner, who was wearing a Lake Windsor high pullover. Mom showed them to a pair of chairs next to the fireplace, facing the crowd. She thanked them for coming, then took a seat next to Dad on the couch. Coach Warner sat down, but Mr. Bridges remained standing to speak. You probably know me. I'm Bud Bridges. I've been principal of Lake Windsor High since the doors opened here 10 years ago. And I have to share with you that this tragic accident is the worst thing that's happened to me as a principal. Mike Costello was a fine a young man I'm proud to say I knew. His loss is a personal loss for me. Let's make sure he's the last one we lose. Everyone in the room looked at Mom, who had startled them with this interruption. Mr. Bridges recovered quickly. Amen to that. I met with the student council officers today. They have decided to dedicate this year's senior awards night to Mike Costello and to plant a tree in his memory in our entranceway. Mom leaned forward. Mr. Bridges, can we count on you to stop these afternoon practices during the thunderstorms? Mr. Bridges looked over at Coach Warner. I've discussed this with the coach, and I'll let him address that. Mr. Bridges looked over at Coach Warner. I've discussed this with the coach, and I'll let him address that. Mr. Bridges sat down, but Coach Warner did not get up. He spoke quietly from his chair directly to Mom. Ma'am, I also took Mike Costello's death personally. I knew Mike well. I knew him as a football player and as a leader. I know that Mike was dedicated to this team and would not want to see it destroyed because of his tragic accident. The coach cleared his throat. And that's really what you're talking about, ma'am, the destruction of this team. There really is no other time to practice, so we would be a team that did not practice. There are some boys who play for me, boys like Antoine Thomas, who are counting on football and on this football season in particular to get them into college. College is not going to happen for them without football. That's just a hard fact. I know some of you have the means to send your kids to college anyway. I'm just saying that not everybody is in that situation. Mom remained hunched forward. We're not saying don't practice. We're saying don't practice when lightning might strike and kill a player. Ma'am, there has never been another boy injured by lightning in our program, and we've been practicing in the same place at the same time for 10 years now. It was an accident, a tragic accident. Somebody gets killed in a car out on the highway, it's tragic, and we mourn the loss of that person, but we don't stop all traffic from using that highway again. We don't close it down. We recognize it was an accident. Mom sat upright. She pulled a small black notebook out of her pocket. Coach Warner, you may be interested in this information. This is from the Tangerine Times, August 1st. Tangerine County is the lightning strike capital of the United States. More people are killed by lightning in Tangerine County per year than any other county in America. That's not any other county in Florida, Coach. That's any other county in America. And there have indeed been other football players killed. one at Tangerine High and one at St. Anthony High. A cross country runner was killed here 2 years ago by lightning. A sophomore from Lake Windsor High was killed stepping off her school bus last year. Being struck by lightning is one of the top causes of accidental death in this area. Coach Warner looked down like he was thinking. When he looked back up at Mom, he seemed to have made up his mind. Ma'am, if you choose to remove your son from the football program based on this information, I will understand. He can turn in his playbook and uniform to me or to one of my assistant coaches. I looked at Dad sitting back on the couch next to Mom. His whole body was stiff, rigid, like he was dead. What would he do? Would he publicly take Coach Warner's side against Mom, or would he defend her and anger Eric's coach? I would not find out the answers to these questions because it was Mom who spoke up. She was not ready to give up either. Mom was not ready to pull the plug on the Eric Fisher football dream that drove our lives. Why can't you hold your practices in the morning for the safety of all? I understand that these boys and you coaches and we parents are all dedicated. We can dedicate ourselves to getting the boys to the football field at 6:30. That way they can practice for an hour, take showers, and be ready for class at 8. Coach Warner replied, Ma'am, I can't ask these players and their parents to give up their sleep to disrupt their lives to come out to practice football at 6:30. He paused to collect his thoughts. We have kids who can only get to school by bus. Those kids could no longer make practice. Again, this is about doing the right thing for everybody involved. Not all of my players have parents at home with cars who don't need to be at work themselves by 6:30 in the morning. Mom was angry now. She pointed her black notebook at him. You seem to want to make this a rich versus poor or a have versus have not issue, right? But a bolt of lightning is not aware of a kid's parent's income when it hits him. That's what we're talking about here. If you'd care to listen, we're talking about kids placed in harm's way every day because of when you schedule your practice. Coach Warner looked down again. He wasn't going to budge. Mr. Bridges was looking more and more nervous. Arthur Bauer's father, to no one in particular, said to no one in particular, it's the same thing with soldiers. They got to train in all kinds of weather so they'll be ready for anything. A long, intense silence followed. It was broken when a large man, larger than Coach Warner, stood up. He had a reddish-gray crew cut and a big head and neck, like a football player's. When he spoke, though, it was with a surprisingly high voice. I'm Bill Donnelly. My son Terry and I live at 6200 Kew Gardens Drive. Some of you may know my house or know about it. It's the one that's been struck by lightning 3 times. Each time it was at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. My son plays football at Lake Windsor High, and I'm very proud of that. But I have to agree with Mrs. Fisher. We live in an area where this lightning strike stuff is a reality. He stopped and addressed the coach directly. I'm willing to drive my son to practice at 4 o'clock in the morning if I have to, and I'll take part in any kind of carpool we set up to make sure that every kid can get there. He turned, then looked right at Mom. I can't sell my house because of this lightning thing. I can't get an insurance agent to write me a homeowner's policy. But I don't really care about any of that. I care about my son and what might happen to him. I can't even imagine what Jack Costello and his wife are going through tonight. Mr. Donnelly sat down, and the rest of the room finally came to life. Other parents leaned over to Mom to tell her that they'd taken part in a carpool too. That they'd take part in a carpool too. Mr. Bridges stood up to speak. He had to wait until the talking died down. Well, all right. I think that's a good suggestion. What we can do now is present this suggestion to all parents. We can contact the parent guardian of each player and ask them to respond to the question, should we move football practice to the early morning? Coach, does that work for you? Coach Warner was quick to agree. Of course, we can try that. Me and my staff are certainly willing. We'll ask the parents, and if the majority want to do that, then that's what we'll do. He paused to look at Mom. Personally, I prefer another solution. Mom replied, which is that we continue to practice in the afternoon, but we call a halt to whenever there is lightning in the area. That's every day, Coach. Every day at 4 o'clock. No, it is not every day. At this time of the season, we might have rain every day. We might have rain during some of our games too. but that does not mean that there is lightning striking in the area every day. The coach stopped and no one else spoke. Mr. Bridges took the opportunity to sum up the meeting. Then we're all agreed on this course of action. We need to present this suggestion to the parents of all players. If the majority want to move practice to the morning, we'll work together to solve the transportation problems that some boys might have. People around the room started mumbling, and the meeting broke up. Mom thanked Mr. Bridges and Coach Warner for coming. They exited quickly. Other parents lingered for a short time at the door, thanking Mom. Mom made a point of thanking Mr. Donnelly right in front of Dad for speaking up in support of our children. Dad pretended to be saying good night to someone else, but I'm sure he heard. By 8:30, the house was empty of guests. Mom, Dad, and I worked silently to restore the furniture and straighten up the great room. Mom headed upstairs first. She said good night to me, but she pointedly ignored Dad. When I went upstairs, he was standing alone by the fireplace, staring at the spot where Coach Warner had been sitting.